guys, and welcome to this episode of Fireside Chat with the Johnstons. I'm Danielle Johnson. I am your host for today's episode. So I am really excited to be on with you guys today. It is pretty much summer. Kids are not totally out of school yet, but I feel like we're getting into those summer months. I don't want to go too far from those months before we start to do a little bit of reflection on last season and what we can do better. And I hate to lump in just last season alone because I feel like we can also already start doing some reflection for those who have done, your end of season banquet and your tryouts and stuff like that, and start looking at those things. If you're like me, you might take things a little bit personal sometimes.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
So, if tryouts don't go well, if the banquet doesn't go well, something just doesn't feel right or people aren't satisfied with it, boy, do I take things personal sometimes. And why? Because my gym is my baby. And if you don't like something about it, I feel like you told me that my baby is ugly.
How dare you?
That can be really hard sometimes because I think when you are the entrepreneur and you're the founder of a company, it is really hard to not take things personal and to not find your own identity truly through your gym. You may be in your first couple of years where you don't necessarily associate your personal identity and your gym's identity just yet. But guys, after a couple of years, you're going to see, for me, tons of stuff in my closet is red and black. Sometimes I buy a really cool shirt and I'm like, man, I love this shirt. I should put twisters on it. Because it's tempting. Because if I'm going to wear it a lot, why not advertise? Why not brand? And I do think that sometimes I myself feel like I am my brand. I built it. It came out of my brain.
It's my baby.
A lot of the things that we do, the way that our website looks, our marketing, our brand in general is very much reflective of me and my personality. And so it can be hard to not tie your identity with your gym. So in this episode, I called it, Your Gym is Not a Therapist. Detach your identity from your business. So guys, it's clear that you love your gym. I hope you love your gym. I hope you're in this business because you started it because you were excited to run a gym. And I hope that you still really love running a gym and you enjoy it on a daily basis. There are always going to be things that are hard and there's always going to be challenges. But if you reflect back on how was 2025, I hope that you say, man, that was a good year. I enjoyed my gym. I enjoyed my job, and it's more than just a job because of all the cool things that I get to do and the impact I get to make on other people. That said, sometimes there is a dangerously blurry line between Twisters and Danielle. And for you, it may be a blurry line as well between who you are as a person and a gym owner and who your gym has become. So today, let's talk about how to separate your self-worth from your cheer success. So let's start by talking about how to recognize when you might have some confusion and you are actually blurring the lines between your identity and your gym. I'm going to use myself as an example for this because I feel like I'm a pretty good example because I've done this way too many times in my gym. There have been times that, if we talk cheer and like the teams, you just pour your whole heart and soul and your effort and your, they say blood, sweat, and tears, but like sometimes that's legitimately true into your teams and into your athletes. I know this year at All-Star World Championship, I came out of AccuScore and I had tears in my eyes. And I was actually pretty embarrassed when I ran into Brandon and Katie. Like my staff knows why I would be frustrated about not getting points for something. But I ran into Brandon and Katie Lemming from Tullahoma and Maggie Cohn from Flyers Athletics, and they're both Next Gen Academy members, and I had tears in my eyes, and I think they thought it was something more serious. I was like, no guys, we just didn't get credit for something. And it's because I had very much connected my worth as a coach to my ability to produce a good team. And I was so frustrated in that moment that, we didn't do as well out on the floor as I knew that we were capable of. I didn't do as good of a job at catching some of the things that I should have caught throughout the season. That said, that emotion was just sort of a flood because you kind of feel in that moment like you're just not as good as you should have been. Like those coaches or those kids deserved something a little bit more. And all you can do is your best, and you can love the kids and you can love your job and you can, work your butt off to be really good at it. But I do recognize that in that moment, my self-worth and my identity as a coach was very much clouded by what AccuScore believed our skills to be. I feel like this happens a lot too when certain kids leave your gym. Like you may have kids that leave and you're like, okay, well, I really like that kid. That's kind of sad. I'm disappointed they're not going to cheer this year. And then you're going to have other kids that leave and man, it just breaks your heart. And it's not because they're leaving because they're moving, and it's not because maybe they're even deciding not to do cheer anymore. Maybe they just want something different and they think it's going to be better somewhere else. And that can be a real crush to your self-worth if you are wrapped up in the identity of you as a coach. Like, are you someone who can take the coaching out of it and you still know who you are as a person? And I think it sounds very like metaphorical or whatever, but like I can speak to Dan, like when Dan first quit his job as a police officer to be full-time with Next Gen and ODT, and I'm talking about Dan Cotton from Next Gen, the CheerBiz podcast. But when he did that, I know that he struggled a little bit internally with like, okay, if I'm not a police officer, who am I? I've just done that my whole life. So, whole adult life. Like if that's not who I am, who am I? And I think a lot of us have coached for so many years that if you're not a coach, who are you? If you're not a gym owner anymore, who are you?
Who are you? Question is, who are you?
If you find that you have staff that quit and you like need a couple of days to get over it, or you kind of take it personal where you're like, man, I just kind of want to unfriend them. Like I want to unfriend the parents of the kids who left and I just don't want to talk to them anymore. Then you're probably in that position where you are building your identity and your self-worth through your gym. Whether you mean to or not, it's probably happening. That can create a real emotional roller coaster in a business like this because you know that every season it is likely that you are going to have somebody leave. Whether it's that they're moving or they are not doing cheer anymore, or like all my 15-year-olds who have to go get jobs, you're going to find yourself on this emotional roller coaster. And even more so if you're wrapping the attempt to make it to finals or the attempt to be in the top 3 or to win the medal or to, globe or whatever it is. Like if you're finding that that is such an inherent goal that you're dreaming about it at night and you're thinking about it during the day and you're watching a movie and your brain just is shifting to how can I make my team better, then you may be wrapping your identity in it. And you have to recognize that that is a very dangerous emotional roller coaster to be on. Gyms are going to have highs and lows. You're going to have times that you had the best enrollment you've ever had or the best retention on your teams you've ever had. And then you're going to have other times that you're like, man, why am I losing all of these kids? Why are they going to a gym up the street? Why do I have half a senior team coming back? Or, several of my staff are leaving. Like, why are these things happening? If you are tying yourself individually to those elements within your gym, you're going to find that you are on a constant emotional roller coaster. And that emotional roller coaster makes it very hard to lead. It makes it hard to lead the staff in your gym and be the visionary and be the person rallying the troops to get you guys to your goal. So let's put it this way. You find that after the things that I've just said, or maybe you knew this already, you're probably wrapped up a little bit too much in your gym or in your teams or even in the sport of cheerleading. Maybe you're listening to this and you're like a judge and you're just so wrapped up into cheer, and it's not just your hobby, but it's your career and it's your social circle and all of that. How do you create that like mental divorce from cheerleading sometimes? Because it does need to happen. And it doesn't need to be permanent, and it doesn't mean that you're going to lose a passion for something. In fact, you're probably going to find that you become more passionate about it when it's not on your mind 24/7. So the first thing you can do is set boundaries for yourself. If you find yourself, sitting down with your spouse at the end of the night and all you're talking about is cheerleading, you have to set those boundaries and you have to tell the other person what your boundaries are going to be. It's not because you don't want to talk about it. It's not because they don't want to listen to it, but you need to have those boundaries so that you can develop a sense of mental clarity of who you are versus who you are as a coach. A couple of weeks ago, I found out some of the kids were not returning to our team. And I did talk about it on a podcast a couple weeks ago, that it was a bit heartbreaking for me. But I let myself take a certain amount of hours. Like literally, I created this rule for myself that said, I'm going to take a certain amount of hours to feel sad about this. And then I'm going to move on, because you have to move on. And it's a disadvantage and it's sad for all of those kids that did stick with you if you spend days and days being sad over the ones who didn't. And so I had to create that boundary for myself. Like, okay, by today at 5 o'clock, I am moving on from whatever I'm feeling right now. And whether that means that I compartmentalize it or I dwell in it until I've dealt with it enough to say, now I can let it go, whatever that looks like for you. I'm certainly not the expert in emotions, so definitely talk to people who are. But whatever that looks like for you, you need to look at it and think about it a little bit and figure out, how can I set that boundary for myself? So it's important to look for those other things that you enjoy in life and figure out how to also prioritize those. And it's hard because when we talk about having a priority or priorities, that literally, if you said, so my priority right now is my health and cheerleading, that wouldn't make a lot of sense, right? Because you have multiple priorities, but you just called it your priority. So whether it is a single or multiple, we tend to look at things and say, all of these things are my priority. Taking care of my staff is my priority. Keeping my athletes safe is my priority. Building a profitable gym that can make a paycheck so that I'm spending time away from my family for a reason is a priority. Running a good business is a priority. Like, we do tend to put too many things in that box that says this is a priority. You have to really look and say, what am I willing to sacrifice and what am I not? And there are going to have to be some non-negotiables. When we have gym owners who join the Next Gen Academy, they fill out a couple of questionnaires. And one of the things it says in there is, when are you committing time to working on this program? Because though it doesn't take, 10 hours a week to build that education and implement the things that we teach, it does take some time, and we want to make sure that whoever joins the program is committed to doing it so that they see the results that we have literally guaranteed that they see. We have to look at this and say, there's so many hours in a day. How many hours am I committing to my gym, and what are the non-negotiables for me? And I thought it was really super smart. Not too long ago, I read through one of those questionnaires for someone who isn't actually even my client that I work with. I enjoy reading them sometimes. And it said, I have some non-negotiables that I have set. And outside of those non-negotiables, I will be working on this content from this time to this time on this day and this day. And I'm like, that is really great, because not only did she set the boundaries, but she blocked out her time, she batched her time, and she said, listen, the things that I'm not going to miss are my daughter's activities, church, and my health and fitness. And she was specific. She didn't just say my health. She broke it out and said, my daily workouts, my meal prepping, I'm not going to miss those things. I'm going to focus on maintaining those things in my schedule, batching time to work on this program, and all the rest of it, what happens, happens, right? Like, I will get all my stuff done, but what happens, happens. So it's important that you're looking for and committing to enjoying things in life outside of cheerleading. I have a really hard time with this sometimes because I do so much enjoy business. My daughter is 15. She totally understands that this is just business. If there are times that she's like, can you bring me Chipotle for lunch at school? And I'm like, no, I just have a lot going on today. She gives pushback a little bit on that. But if I say, no, I'm on a call with clients from this time and this time for Next Gen, she knows there is no argument on that. Like, that is a non-negotiable, that I will not miss those meetings unless it is an emergency or something that I have pre-scheduled and asked, for some grace in readjusting. Those people in your life have to know those boundaries as well and be willing to respect them. In the same sense, Justin knows that I come in here in his office, which is where our podcast studio is, and I record on Fridays. And so he knows that I'm not going to answer my phone during that time. I can't reschedule it to go out to lunch. Like, I have to do this because this is a commitment that I've made to myself and the many, many listeners that we now have on podcasts for Spotify and Apple Podcasts, almost at 5,000 downloads. In fact, I bet by the time you guys hear this, we'll be over 5,000 downloads, which is sad in comparison to Dan Cotton, because I'm going to give you the hint right now. He is at 100,000 downloads. Is that insane or what? Yes, that's wild. Anyway, so people in your life have to be able to respect those boundaries that you set and help you to enforce those. You have to be able to expect the challenges and mentally prepare for them. I know that for me, February through April is going to be crazy in my gym every year. The best thing I can do is try to plan ahead. I can start the projects that I know I'm going to have in January. I can, always be working ahead. I can always be systemizing so that others can help. But I just have to know I'm going to be crazy in my gym February, March, and April because I am ending one season while I am planning and starting another. And that becomes very chaotic for gym owners. And so if I don't plan ahead, then I'm spending 15, 16, maybe even 18 hours a day working on things in my gym. And that makes it very hard to set those boundaries and maintain them, and also to detach my identity. Like, have you guys ever gone to a roller coaster park, like a theme park, and you ride roller coasters all day, and then you lay down in bed at night and you feel like you're still on the roller coaster? For me, that's what things are when I am doing too much of something and I'm thinking about it or dwelling on it or actually doing something too much. I have to detach myself, or I find myself dreaming about it at night. And I think I said on a podcast back in like February or March, I literally am doing cheer 24/7 because I'm either working with gym owners to help them better their programs, or I'm working on my program to make it better, or at that stage in the season, I was dreaming about it. Like, there was no way to get away from it. And that was one of the ways that I recognized my identity was falling way too much within my own job, my own career, and not enough within who I am as a person. So I could tell you stories literally all day from gym owners that I work with who have been in this boat and have recognized that that is the case with their identity. The hardest lessons that I could actually tell you, though, are from the gym owners who are in their 60s and have owned their gyms for 20 and 30 years, because there are lots of those gym owners out there, and a lot of them have joined the Next Gen Academy because they're like, listen, I've owned my gym all these years and now I want to sell it, and I'm told by this broker that my gym isn't worth anything. And in the course of having some really well-seasoned gym owners like that, I've learned one thing. You have to focus on maintaining those boundaries and separating your identity very early on, because a lot of these very seasoned gym owners have expressed some wisdom that for the first 15 or 20 years of their business, they didn't do that, and their kids grew up and they missed it, or their husbands or their wives kind of grew apart from them and they missed those things too. I've literally seen the horror stories. I've seen gyms tear apart families. I've seen it tear apart marriages. I've seen mothers and daughters be torn apart. I've seen sisters. I've seen best friends. All of those things can happen in the gym if you are finding your identity within your business, or if you are identifying yourself first and foremost as a gym owner. And so we've got to divide that and stop looking toward our staff as our therapists, and stop looking toward the parents in our gym as our only circle of friends. And whether you are listening to that thinking, oh, I would never do that, a whole bunch of people do, because I talk to them on a regular basis. And we find that best friend that you had is also now a mom in your gym. And gosh, it's really hard to not sit there on a Friday night and talk about cheerleading. So community helps. Having somebody who has been in your shoes or is currently in your shoes absolutely helps. During COVID, the Next Gen Academy, we did social hours where we would literally just sit and hang out and like virtually on Zoom, like play a game, or like we draw something from, a jar and you'd have to answer the question. And it was really cool because you got to learn about other people and you got to meet them. And usually Justin had a Twisted Tea and I had a White Claw. But what it did more than anything was it provided a community where you knew you were not alone. Like, you were not the only gym out there trying to figure out how the heck to teach cheerleading, competitive cheerleading on Zoom, right? Or how to retain these kids that have been at your gym for 4 or 5 years that now can't be in the gym. And so they're wanting to drop classes, but they're also hoping that you can survive and stay open after the shutdowns. Right. And so we didn't have to talk about all those things, but we had to all be in the same Zoom room, you could say, so that we knew that we weren't the only ones in that position. That is my absolute favorite thing about conferences. And we've usually got a conference releasing coming up at any given time. So head over to ngconferences.com if you are looking for something like that. But even more so in the Next Gen Academy, you always know there is this other group of people that know exactly what you're going through because they've either been there or boy, could they see themselves in your shoes very easily. Having a community of people who understand is really valuable, and it's good for your mental state in those moments that you need to say, I need to talk about this, but I also need to set the boundary to talk about it and then be done with it by this time. So, guys, if you feel like you have ever looked to your identity and the very first thing introducing yourself is I'm a gym owner, or I'm a coach, or I'm an all-star director, and you need to find that separation, in the next, I know it sounds weird. Hey, join the Next Gen Academy where we can help you grow your gym, but also, we can help you do things like that because if you're working in your gym 24/7, it is really hard to separate your identity when you don't have time or money to do anything but work in your gym. It can't just be your hobby and your career, right? You have to separate those at one point. I hope you guys got some good stuff out of this, and I look forward to meeting a whole bunch of you guys at our upcoming conference. Please stop by, say hello. I want to meet you guys, and I want to know who our listeners are so that I know how to continue developing content that you guys can resonate with and, we can connect on a weekly basis. So thank you for joining me on this episode of Fireside Chat. And with that, I will see you guys next week.